They say you are your worst enemy, but with a little bit of introspection, I think we can take care of that guy. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everyone and everything in between, welcome to the Stay Positive podcast. I am one of your two hosts, Alex.
And joining Alex is Pete over here. That was pretty good. I liked that.
Thank you. I worked really hard on it.
To be honest, most of the time when we start these episodes, Alex or I will just say, okay, I have a decent intro now. And no one tells the other what it's actually going to be. And it usually just ends up being a pleasant surprise. If it's pretty shitty, then we cut it. But you know how it is.
Roll the dice, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, with that intro out of the way, Pete, I wanted to spend this episode having a little bit of a talk, a refresher course, if you will, on something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is introspection. The For those of you who don't know what that means, basically taking a look inside of yourself, being honest with yourself, seeing you for who you really are, seeing the actions you do as good or bad, with no excuses, no hiding, no workarounds, just looking at, there's no bad, there's no good, there's simply just looking at your current situation in your life and being honest with yourself. Because as much as I'm on your side, Pete's on your side, we're all on your side, but we're rooting for you. But at the end of the day, the most honest person should be yourself when it comes to the matter of you. And I do think that if you really want to maximize your life and make it the most positive life you can possibly have, you need to take a look inward and see both the good side and the bad side of what it means to be you.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of reflecting on yourself, your actions especially. I never really knew how to do it until I just started thinking. So, you got to teach someone first how to think. And knowing how to think at the very least is not something that is easily taught because you need to literally look at everything under a microscope, every little aspect of life, whether it be the trees or the things that you are doing, the plants, the animals, everything outward and inward. You gotta literally dissect it as much as possible. And that is really difficult for a lot of people. The way I learned was I literally just did exactly what I said just now. I tried to see everything in the world from a third person perspective, not through my own eyes, but from outward, out of my own body, almost like an out of body experience, but not quite, and just trying to observe everything, not doing anything but trying to observe and see what is going on, taking it at face value. And then, I mean, I can talk about how I also went down that rabbit hole, but that was the starting point for me. That got me going.
Yeah. I think I think first of all, I think introspection, while obviously everything should be early on, I think this should be a topic for young adults and older, because when you're a kid you're kind of learning everything. You're in the middle of learning how the world is. So I don't think that's the time to be perfectly introspective. Once you become like a teenager or you become a young adult, now I think you've developed as a person, and none of us are perfect. As much as you might think we are, we're not. And I think you said it's very difficult. I think one bit of advice I could give is ask yourself why you do the things that you do.
Mm.
Because, for a long time, I've mentioned last year many times, I used to drink soda a lot. And there came a point where I was overweight, and I was just thinking to myself, this isn't good. What is causing me to be overweight? And obviously I didn't want to do that. I was not content with that at all. And then I asked myself, well, why am I doing these things? So the reason was I wasn't doing any exercise. I was being very lethargic, staying sedentary. I was sitting down most of the every day, and I was eating junk food. I wasn't eating any salad, or I wasn't moderating my food, and I was drinking a lot of soda. And I ask myself, it's like, why are you doing this? Like, and there's no, you don't need to feel guilty per se. You just need to think about it. Why are you doing this? And the only answer I could think of is, oh, it tastes good. And that is a legitimate answer, but think about it. Is your health, is your well being, is your future, is your handsome or beautiful good looks, is it really worth that can of soda? Or is it really worth that second helping? Is it really worth pushing yourself down a path that you know you don't want to go down, but in the long term at least? But in the short term, you just say, screw it, I'm happy for the short term, and that's that. And when you come to terms with who you are and the decisions you make and why you do those decisions, you can start making new decisions based on more long-term goals. So my long-term goal was to get in better shape and was to lose weight. And I slowly took the steps to trying to do that by cutting soda and by slowly, like, I didn't start eating healthy like day one, right? I was still eating the same junk food, but I was eating just a little bit less, you know? And I was eating maybe a little more salad. And just ever so slowly, like, let's say I had 3 pieces of chicken and French fries. On the first week of self-improvement, on the first week of changing myself for the better, I ate 2 pieces of chicken and half the fries. So, I'm still eating the same thing, but I'm just slowly bringing it down. And eventually I started adding some greens, started eating some salad, replacing the fries with mashed potatoes, cutting down the portion sizes even more, and just like ever so slowly changing myself. But where did that all come from? It came from the fact that I looked into myself and I said, well, Alex, you're fat and you don't want to be fat anymore. So why are you doing this? To yourself. I asked those questions, I figured it out, and then ever so slowly, I started fixing myself for the better. But you have to challenge that demon within. You have to challenge the bad side of you, which can be tough, No one likes... I'm personally not a very confrontational person, and it definitely is, I don't know, metaphysically awkward to challenge who you are as a being.
Yeah.
And then go against that person. But that's the power of introspection, I think, because if you just don't do that ever, you're just going to live based on short-term goals and carnal desires, which may sound pleasant, and I'm not going to tell anyone how to live. If that is the way you want to live your life, so be it. But I would like to say I don't recommend it, because that can lead to, 1, a not healthy life, and 2, I believe it will lead to a self-destructive life, where you kind of drown out your being with carnal desires. You drown it out. You basically kind of numb the pain of real life with all the short-term decisions you make. Like, I ate food that I liked, and it tasted good, but it was making me not happy in the long term. And when you're not happy, you just eat more to make yourself even more numb to the pain. And I'm sure many alcoholics and drug addicts can also probably subscribe to a similar mentality of like, life is hard, or I'm not happy where I am right now, so let me drink more, let me do one more dose of this. Just keep doing it because it numbs the pain. But that pain's still there. You know what I'm saying? That pain will not be gone just because you satiated your carnal desire that day. You'll wake up tomorrow with the same pain. If you want to get rid of that pain for good, you're going to have to look deep down inside yourself. You're going to have to look at your demons and ask yourselves, why are you doing this to yourself? And that's, my little, I don't know if you call it a rant, that's my little speech.
That was a rant. That was a monologue of monologues. Good on you. To be honest, though, I think it's very tough to just sit here all high and mighty, especially because, once again, I agree solely and wholeheartedly with you. But it's tough to sit all high and mighty and say, hey, this is what you got to do, just do it. When the reality is, the way society works nowadays is to literally feed into the short-term desires that we always have. And everything that we encounter from a media perspective, any consumer perspective, the things are there for us to literally indulge in. And that makes things very difficult because we all have this switch in our heads that will tell us, hey, if you do this thing, you're going to get that instant gratification. And most of the time, that's obviously not correct, or at least it's not healthy. But because of the way that things have progressed, especially because of technology, and like I said, I'm a big proponent of technology. I think it has the capacity to do wonders for the world if implemented the right way. But because of it, we've also decreased attention spans. We've decreased this sort of threshold for what we can handle because we're always constantly getting bombarded with information. And as a result, our feedback loops have become way, way tighter. So every time something happens, we have an immediate response. And because of that, that short-term window with which any desire can be satisfied has really, really, really shrunk. So now, as soon as you go to a website, for instance, you need to have some sort of immediate response, of course, or some kind of interaction with this website that will tell you exactly what you should be expecting already, right? Whereas before the age of computers, we said, you know what? I can go a day without talking to the girl down the block or the guy down the block, right?
Right.
Nowadays, we have no way to do that. And the reason is because those windows, those thresholds, they've gotten smaller, they've shrunk. We have decided that, and it's become much easier to just place the blame outside of ourselves, right? We are unable to take accountability and ownership of the fact that these things, while they are accelerated and catalyzed by everything that's going on around us and the things that play into our lives, we have complete ownership of it regardless. We still are our own selves, and we need to retain that. So I don't want to go on a rant, to be honest. I want to hear your thoughts too. But my point is, things have gotten a lot faster. Things are just fast nowadays. Everything is. And because of that, people lose themselves very easily. And I don't think that we should be losing ourselves. We need to take the time that we need to give ourselves the care that we need when it's necessary. But you tell me what you think.
I kind of hate that instant gratification really is so tightly wound in the first world society, how powerful it is, really. And like you said, there are so many people who are quote unquote gurus or life coaches and they all say the same thing. It's like, you want to do better, then just do better. And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the person who's just said, put your life together.
Exactly, because not everybody can do that, right? It's not like you can just decide one day, all right, you know what? My life sucked previously, but it's going to be amazing now. What happens if you're in a really tough situation? You can have the mindset, but it won't take you out of your situation unless you take active steps to get yourself out of there. It's just a reality.
Yeah. I think I read something about rehab and how it actually works, and how some people who go through rehabs, whether it's alcohol or drugs or any addiction, how it works. The patients who go through rehab, when they start rehab, they imagine it as, oh, all life's problems are just going to magically go away. I'm going to go to a beach at the sunset and it's just going to feel like I'm walking in the clouds. And after a week or two in rehab, they realize, oh, wait, that's not, my problems are still here. The only issue now is I don't have the crux of my addiction, or I don't have that carnal desire. I don't have that release, that escapism. I don't have something to numb the pain of my problems. And that is hard. It's really hard. For a long time, oh, rehab's easy. Just stop what you're doing. But like, no, it's not like that. You lose your comfort zone. You really are taking away the the rug is pulled from underneath the ground and you really are kind of not stuck per se, but now you really have to deal with your problems without the harmful instant gratification or instant joy that comes from drugs or alcohol or binge eating or whatever it is. Now you don't have that, so now you have to face reality without it. And I do think that, so I before when I said the skill of introspection, I think one way to try and master it, because it is a skill, is to constantly question why about many things, including the things you do yourself. As far as putting it into practice, like you said, not everyone can just flip a switch and just instantly put their life together or start pulling their life together. I really do think, and I highly recommend, that if you do feel you are suffering in any way, to seek out a therapist, like just for one meeting, and just be introspective with them and talk it out with them. Because it really is. We had an episode about communication, but that was about communicating with one another. Introspection is kind of like communicating with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And we established communication is so powerful amongst each other. And I do think, to a certain extent, it's all equally as powerful, if not more, if you have a good communication with oneself. When you can look at yourself, look at the things you do, and come to at least some understanding of why you do it. Because the first step to solving a problem, the first step to bettering your life, is acknowledging that something could be done better. I think one of the lessons that I would like to bestow upon the people, not to be preachy, but this is something I personally believe. No one's perfect, and we all know that no one on earth, you or I, no one is perfect. But some people like to just make excuses and say, oh, I'm not where I'm at, or things are bad, or I'm suffering because of everything else. Or because of like the instant gratification. It's like, oh, society is just putting all these traps in the ground, in the websites, in the advertisements. It's all around us. It's hard to not fall into these traps. It's not my fault. And I agree. It's not always your fault. But at the end of the day, it's still your life. And if you want to get out of those traps, if you want to better yourself, you're going to have to acknowledge the world for what it is and who you are for what you are. As for how to try and combat this society of constant instant gratification, it's hard. I'm not going to lie. It is hard.
You always give a pretty bad response for this, to be totally honest.
What?
I say you always give a bad response for this because it is really difficult, right? But you just have to literally turn it off. You just got to separate yourself completely.
Yeah, I think you did something. You did, what was it called? Detox week or detoxification day?
I used to do these things called dopamine fast. I haven't done one in a while. Remember that? Yeah. Where I would just completely isolate myself from the world. I'd spend the whole day. I wouldn't take in any sort of information. I wouldn't eat. I would just drink water and meditate all day or walk around.
I don't think I wouldn't. I mean, I encourage people to try and see how they feel, but I think that the moral of doing that is to try and separate yourself from a society that kind of wants to brainwash you, that kind of wants you to pursue your carnal desires. If you want to pursue that stuff, I'm not going to lecture you and say you shouldn't or you can't. If you want to, you can. But I do think that if you want a more fulfilling life, resisting those carnal desires and pursuing your real desires, your long-term goals, so to speak, I think you'll find that the way more rewarding path to take. And that all starts with introspection. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to ask yourself, what do you want? And be honest, because if you do something just because it feels good, that's, like I said, if that's what you want, great. But if you want something more, if you want to be somewhere in 5 years, if you want to do something, be honest with yourself. Say, I want to do this. And then look at the decisions you're making and ask yourself, are the decisions I'm making helping me get to where I want to be? Are they doing what I want to do? And if your answers are no, then ask yourself, why am I not doing that? And you'll from personal experience, I know other people will obviously have many other responses to that. But from my personal experience, when you ask yourself, why are you doing something that isn't like intuitive or isn't helping you out in any way, shape, or form, even for relaxation, why doesn't it help? You'll be honest with yourself and you'll slowly stop doing it. It sounds silly. It sounds ridiculous that you say, "Oh, just stop doing it." Well, you have to acknowledge that you don't want to do it. As stupid as that sounds, you have to acknowledge whether you want to eat like 10 pieces of pizza versus one slice. You have to acknowledge, like, do I need to hit this bong one more time? You have to acknowledge, do I need this other beer? You have to acknowledge, do I spend one more hour on YouTube, or do I get an actual good night's sleep? You have to acknowledge these things, because if you just say 1 more hour, 5 more minutes, 10 more slices, if you just keep numbing the pain and you just keep numbing your senses to what you actually want out of life, you'll never get there. And years will go by and you'll just be stuck with, where did it all go? And I feel like people have that sentiment of, where did it go? Because this really is like a numbing feeling. When you satisfy these instant gratifications or lustful carnal desires, the time just flies. It just goes. And before you know it, before you come to your senses, you're like, where did it all go? And that's why with this little episode, I really wanted to just really emphasize how looking inward and just asking why you do what you do, and ask the questions of, what do you want to do with your life? I think that's the essence of introspection, in my opinion, and I really can't emphasize how important I think it is.
You really like that phrase, carnal desires.
I prefer the word carnal versus lustful.
That's hilarious. No, I'm just messing with you. So, I think we found this sort of structure, ironically enough, which is very parallel to Simon Sinek. He creates this structure around how to make a better company in the context of business and startups and whatever. But the idea is, at least to reach your consumers and to also to create a culture within your company and without as well, you want to start at this crux of why, right? And like I said, I think we created this sort of parallelism, ironically enough, without any planning of how to do introspection, right? First of all, you got to find the why. Why are you introspecting? Why do you need to reflect on yourself? Okay, is there a problem you need to solve for yourself? Great. If you've identified the problem, which Alex has literally laid out in steps on how to go about even thinking about it, that's great. Now you can actionably start, hopefully, looking for results. That part is the how, which is, it comes after why in Mr. Sinek's structure. And the how is a little more difficult, but I know I alluded to this at the beginning when I said you need to know how to think. And that part, I think I can bring it back here now and say, once you start looking at everything under a microscope, everything outside in the world, within yourself, or even in relationships, people that you love, people that you care about, you start dissecting those things and you realize, okay, am I interacting in all of these situations the way that I would like to, or at least the way that I would like to create for myself? Is the person I want to be the same as the person that is in these interactions currently? And if those two things are different, then you have some work to do. And I always deal with this, right? And it's not like I'm dealing with it. It's something that I actively observe within myself. And I'm sure you have as well, right? We're trying to pursue the best versions of ourselves possible, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So for me, if you're able to break down those things, at the very least, you'll have some sort of starting point. And not only are you going to have data to work with, because you're going to know, okay, in that situation I acted like that, but I didn't want to. In that situation I acted like that, and it was great. The feedback from the people was awesome. I made my relationship better. I got this thing out of that, whatever it may be. However you want to see it, that's fine. But you got to apply it to yourself in some way, shape, or form. And just giving yourself the time of day to think, really observe. There's one thing my friend and I, we like to do sometimes is just people watch, right? Because we want to see how people are interacting with each other and how that context fits in the overarching context of the situation at hand. And it's really interesting because you'll see stuff that you never really expected before. Have you ever done that before? First of all,
Watch people.
yeah, just watch people interact with each other. Not in a creepy way. It sounds so freaking weird, but trust me, everybody at some point in their lives has done this, and if you haven't, then you're lying to yourself.
Which you should ask yourself why.
Yeah, exactly.
As for your question, yeah, all the time. I mean, whenever you're in the line to a grocery store or a restaurant or anything, and you just you're bored and there's nothing to do, you just start looking around, looking at people talk. On rare occasions, you'll see people have freakouts in public, and you just look at them and you're like, I wonder what's going
Free
on over
entertainment.
there. I live in the city currently, so sometimes on rare occasions you just hear people screaming in the middle of the night, just talking about relationship stuff, and I'm just like, oh, someone's not happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just sit there and you wonder what they're doing, if they're smiling and laughing, what was the joke, or what's so fun. If they're looking upset, you think, geez, I wonder what's going on through their mind. You just like you said, it's kind of hard to say it's not creepy, but it really is just looking and processing. Gee, how are they doing? How's their life going? What are they thinking? Maybe there's music in the elevator or in the grocery store, and you see someone tapping their foot, and you're like, oh, they like that song too. And it's little things. It really is just the little things you pay attention to.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I think that's also a subconscious or consciously good way to improve your observation skill and your introspection skill. Just putting two and two together, looking at someone and thinking, oh, I wonder what they're going through. And you might be wrong. You might be 100% wrong. But it's still something to do, you know?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing also. I know that I talked about how, and it's really qualitative what we're talking about, right? But an honest way that I've done it is, and I literally haven't missed a day. I've done this every single day since July, and I don't foresee any reason to stop at all, ever, is those journaling prompts that I talked about, that Grace mentioned a really long time ago. And like I said, I started doing them mid last summer, damn near 8 months ago. I haven't missed a single day for 8 months. Every single morning, I'll take 10 minutes. I'll do some journaling and answer these prompts. Same thing at night, 5 minutes at night because there are less. But it's just the things that I'm grateful for, the things that would make today great, some affirmations about myself, someone I want to send some love to. Just very, very simple stuff that will get you thinking about what really matters in your life. I'll give you an example. The other day, I was just surfing the interwebs, Twitter particularly, your favorite social media platform
website
of all. So, like I said, I like Twitter for certain things, and I did find a really insightful article there. It was about, I forget the title, and if I find it, then we'll link it. But it was just about putting yourself in different perspective, how to view time. And I'm not in a sciencey way. This is about your time on Earth and your time with others. So he would give several examples of, you only will have this many more times to do this one action. So let's say he's a surfer and he surfs every other day in the summer time only. let's assume like 3 times a week for 3 months. That's all right. Abstracting away like 50 times, right? 50 times a year he'll go surfing. And he does that every single year after the age of 20. He'll only have, well, this is a very big number, but he'll do it 60 more years. You multiply that by 50, you get the number of times he'll get to surf again until the ripe age of 90, if he assumes that's when his life ends, right?
So 3,000 times.
Sure, math god. So now let's look at some other situations, right? Let's say, on a more personal note, you see your family 3 times a year. And then you abstract that on that same scale. So 3 times a year for 70 more years of life. Or let's also take into account that said family may be your parents who are older than you, and so they're closer to that 90-year threshold maybe, God willing, hopefully, whatever. And your life is finite, so you only have until that point. If we did the math out, you'll realize, oh wow, I only have 100 more set experiences or interactions with my parents. And that is so jarring. It jarred me a little bit the other day because I was honestly really, as of late, thinking, maybe I should move away from New York. Like ASAP.
But it helps put into
perspective. And I want to, right? But yeah. So I'm getting there. The point is, you really realize all of these other intertwined stories, all these other things that really matter just by thinking about them and literally just shifting your perspective as a result of the things that matter most to you. So if you think about those things that matter most to you and you take the time to actually appreciate them, it doesn't need to be like what I do 15 minutes a day. Take 2 minutes a day. Go on a walk every morning if that makes you happy. But taking the time to understand those core values, I think, would really, really benefit people. So I'm a big advocate of it, man. Always have been.
Yeah, I think we really touched upon. I think we sold our pitch about how valuable introspection really is to just a meaningful life, a more fulfilling life. It helps you put into perspective. It helps you find yourself. It helps you be honest with yourself, set your goals, put you on the right path, or at least take one step in the direction that you want to go in, rather than just go down a numb filling path of mindless distractions and carnal desire. I know that's my word of the day, but it's true in my opinion. In my opinion, I should emphasize. So I guess this has been our little introspective chat for the day. With all that being said, everyone, you may be your worst enemy, but you're also your best friend. So do yourself a solid and
stay positive.